Welcome to Obsessed, where Mika, Tia, and I challenge the thoughts that limit you, where we provide the tools for transformation. Be prepared to be swept away into the raw power of obsession, unlocking secrets and stories behind the insatiable hunger for growth and change. This is more than just a podcast. This is your story. It is a manifesto for those who refuse to settle, who dare to dream, and who are relentless in the pursuit of living a great life. Get obsessed with your life. John Wayne Gacy. We're talking John Wayne Gacy with his final defense attorney, Karen Conti. For a little context, if you don't know who John Wayne Gacy is, sit back, take notes, and let's let the conversation begin.
Tonight in News Extra, the man who committed what may be the crime of the century. His name is John Wayne Gacy, convicted of killing 33 innocent people and destroying hundreds of lives. He's never talked to anyone about the case until tonight. His murder spree was first discovered on a cold December day when the first of his victims were found in the crawl space beneath his home. They were taken out one by one as the world watched. For 13 years, Gacy refused to talk. But tonight, he's breaking that silence.
When they paint the image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies, I said, this is ludicrous.
But the jury didn't find it ludicrous. After barely 2 hours deliberation, its verdict was murder by Gacy, 33 times, 29 bodies buried in that house of his on Summerdale, a crime of horrendous proportions. In the crawl space underneath, bodies covered with lime and encased in plastic, dug up a few days before Christmas and carried into the December cold, one after another after another. But despite all this evidence, he says he has proof he didn't do it. Here's one of dozens of examples of what he calls proof.
I've taken 3.5 hours of truth serum, and under sodium amytal, the maximum amount that I could have, it shows that I have no knowledge of the crime whatsoever. Never have had.
But this is where his attempt to change history, which is what he thinks will get him a new trial, begins to break down. There is no proof anywhere that he ever took truth serum. Now, it's not only a matter of physical evidence, it's a character issue as well. Many times during our interview, he tried to portray himself as a good guy, an ethical, hard-working family man.
I've always looked after my children, even now.
What kind of values do you remember imparting to them?
The kind of values?
Were you strict with them too?
No, not as strict as, no. A lot of things that my dad did, I refused to do, because I don't believe in hitting children. I don't believe in spoiling a child either. My values are such that if you give enough love to the children...
You're accused of murdering 33 kids, and you say you didn't believe in hitting. I mean...
Well, anybody that knows... You see, first of all, you're basing this garbage on what you've heard of me.
There are others he killed, children he lured into his home anyway who didn't get out alive. When he was arrested, he told the police what he did and how he did it, with a rope that he used as a tourniquet. Now he says he didn't do it, and shows me his rope trick to explain how the police misunderstood. That and more of what he's twisting into his pleas of innocence.
Wow. He is someone you knew in real life, IRL. Chills even to this day. And we have Karen Conti. She is the best-selling author of the book Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy. She also is an attorney, and she also has a radio show on WGN. Karen, welcome to Obsessed. And we're obsessed with you. I'm obsessed with true crime. Tia's obsessed with true crime. Mika's a little bit unsure, so she's not obsessed with true crime. But this is real.
Thank you for having me.
Karen, looking back just even at those clips, like what comes to mind first?
Well, when he was committing those crimes, I was in high school. So, I grew up in the Chicago area thinking he was the boogeyman. I mean, if you put yourself back in those days in the 70s, we just didn't really understand what Gacy was all about. It was a much more innocent time, and you didn't have the graphic stuff you have now available all over. So I knew he was a bad dude, but I didn't really comprehend what a pedophile was and what a serial killer was. So now flash ahead 14 years. I've gone to college, I've gone to law school, I've been a lawyer for a few years, and I get the call to represent Gacy. And it was the biggest shock in my life, truly.
I bet. How did you end up saying yes? Like, what did representing him look like for you, and what was the motive behind it?
Well, it started out with curiosity because my law partner and I had argued a case before the U.S. Supreme Court on a First Amendment issue. And so we were on the list of First Amendment lawyers. Gacy had a First Amendment civil suit that the prison had brought against him. It was really frivolous because he was going to be executed. So why was he concerned with money? But Gacy's mind didn't work like everyone else's. So his people called and said, would you go down and talk to Gacy? Would you drive that 6.5 hours south to Menard Correctional Center and talk to him about his civil case? Well, my partner and I had no intention of representing him at all, but I was curious. I had grown up knowing who this guy was. His face was etched in my memory, and I wanted to see what the epitome of evil looked like. And I wanted to sit across from him to see if I could tell if he was an evil person. And so we made that trip. And then when we got there, I realized this is so much bigger than Gacy. This is about the cause of the death penalty, something I've always been against. And so we decided to take the case to try to save Gacy's life.
What was it like to walk into a room with someone that you knew was an evil human being, like one of the most evil human beings on planet of Earth for all of history? You walk into a room with him. What was that like?
First of all, it wasn't what I thought it would be like, because I thought there was going to be a plexiglass cubicle like the movies. But in Illinois death row at the time, all the criminals who are on death row are there visiting their pastors and their girlfriends and their lawyers. So I see Gacy, but I also see the I-57 killer and this guy who poisoned his whole family and this guy who did that. So I'm sitting there going, all right, Gacy's not going to hurt me because I'm not his type. And he's a compartmentalized serial killer, right? He's a predator. He goes out and seeks out certain types, takes them home, tortures them, and on and on. I wasn't afraid of him because he wasn't going to do anything to me. The other dudes, I wasn't quite so sure of because a lot of those people were psychotic, unmedicated, and basically had nothing left to lose. So that was scary. Gacy was not. Gacy was 5'9", prison pallor, normal, cheerful, glib, friendly, funny, just like the guy next door.
That's, I think, the scariest part about all of it is like, he's the guy next door, right? He's not this person who you get the chills just walking by, like, oh, something doesn't feel right about this person.
And that's what's so chilling, because if he can hide who he really is and walk around all day long like he did, having a really good job, making a lot of money, taking care of his family, volunteering at church, mowing the lawn of his neighbors, doing all these wonderful moral things, and yet he would go out at night and turn into a monster, a true monster. So who else do I know who's capable of that? And that's chilling.
It's mind-blowing. Well, first of all, can you all hear me okay? Okay, perfect. And Karen, it was just mind-blowing for me to, like, as I'm researching and I see, like you said, he's a model citizen. He is volunteering and he's a part of these clubs and becoming vice president and growing these clubs and contributing to society and, plowing the snow for the neighbors in the greater Chicago area. And he's committing these acts. I still can't rationalize this at all. So it's mind-blowing to me that he's someone that's just like as sweet as can be and can even be a clown. He would be, a clown for parties and all these different events, but then be like just a totally different individual, like you said, a predator at night. I can't make sense of it.
It does blow you away. And it blew me away every time I spend time with them, because here I am engaging with a human being, having human conversations, and knowing in my head, picturing what he's capable of. And you just can't bring the two of those things together. And, you sit there all the time and think, what happened? Was he born evil? I don't think so. His father wasn't nice to him, but a lot of people have bad upbringings that don't turn around and do what he did. So, it's constant puzzlement when you're dealing with somebody like that. But again, that's why he got away with it, because if he had been the epitome of evil or acted like a weirdo or did things that were socially awkward all the time and tripped up, he probably would have been apprehended a lot sooner.
As a young lawyer entering into defending this evil man it's out there, right? Like, this is common knowledge and it's in the media. It's talked about a ton. He was considered the century's evil guy, right? How did the people that knew you personally handle and accept that you were about to defend him? I know you made it very clear that you weren't defending him to get out of prison, right? You were defending him to get off of death row only. But still, like, how did your personal relationships get affected, and how did they accept that?
My parents thought I had gone awry in my career. I think a lot of people were concerned and wondered why I was doing this, because this was not something that I normally did. I never represented somebody on death row. And once the whole public backlash started, it was crazy. I mean, death threats, we had a bomb threat. I got the brunt of it. I don't know if it was because I'm a woman, because I was the only woman attorney at the time. And also I was his only woman on death while he was on death row in 14 years. So, but I think maybe they thought I was the weak link, or they tried to sexualize me, but a lot of it was directed to me. I still get it to this day. And even judges would pull me aside in court and say, what are you doing? Let the guy die. That's, I know he's entitled to a defense, but why are you doing this? So a lot of backlash. I got kicked out of a restaurant. Someone dumped like tons of ketchup on my front porch.
Wow.
Park. I guess that was symbolic for blood. Either that or it was a Heinz delivery truck that went wrong. But,
Wow.
and so all of these things happen. And I didn't think it was going to be a walk in the park representing him, but I had no idea that people couldn't separate the idea that I'm not advocating for him getting out. I'm not saying what he did was right. I am concerned for the victims' families. I feel for them. That's my job. This is what I do. I represent people who do good things and bad things, who are guilty, who are innocent. And people would understand that. But now I understand that the anger and the righteous anger of people at the Gacy's of the world, I understand why they're angry. But I don't think that, I didn't expect that it was going to be put on me.
Wow. Did you ever have a chance to talk to the victims' families? Did that change any of your perspective on what you did?
No, the victims' families really never wanted to talk to me. I reached out when I wrote the book to 2 families to see if maybe they wanted to tell their story or say something, and have some, give us some thought to what was going on. But they didn't want to, and I understand that. I do understand that.
Well, I remember seeing the Insiders edition, the interview with one of the mothers of the victim, and her son had just gotten out of the Navy's and was at a job, and unfortunately was one of Gacy's victims. And she said, and I'm paraphrasing, she said, I could never forgive him. I don't even think God would forgive him, or God would blame me for not forgiving him. And I felt so bad for her. I could feel her pain. She felt like her life was cut short by her son's life being taken by Gacy's. So, but I think it's amazing for you to actually want to include their side of the story in your book. And did you have to muster the courage, or was it easy for you to go what they want, to even want to reach out to them?
Well, a couple things. The day of the execution, I was on Good Morning America, and Joan London, if you remember who she is, probably your younger listeners don't, but she was a very respected journalist. And I realized that was the morning of the execution that I was going to be on a split screen with the Piest family. And the Piest family, their beautiful young man was the reason Gacy was caught. He was the last victim. And it was a horrendous story. And I said, I'm not doing that. That's not fair to them. It's not fair to me. My story is my story of why I'm doing what I'm doing, but their story is a unique story, and I'm not doing it unless you change that. They did. And so another thing I want to say about this is in my book. I get called upon to represent victims' families all the time. People who were beaten by their husbands. I once was representing a girl who was 9 years old, who was sexually abused by a very prominent political figure in the neighborhood, in the very wealthy western suburbs. And they weren't prosecuting him, and they hired me to try to get him prosecuted, and I did. So it's not like I always favor killers or I like killers. I represent victims all the time, and I do it zealously. I want to put the guy in jail. So this is what I do for a living. I represent people in all walks of life, no matter what they've done, and I try to get them the best result possible.
And I feel like you have made that so clear in like the different interviews that I've heard of yours and in your own just reporting. Like it's very clear that you were not trying to get him off by any means. Like he was guilty in your mind, and it was just getting him out of death row, and like not only him, but like future people who were on death row innocently. Right? It was death row in general that you were fighting against, and it happened to be his case that propelled you in that direction, if I understand right. How did that, like when you were going down that path, like did you know, or did you have an intuition that this was the right way to approach your future goals for your career? Or were you terrified that this was going to be like kind of the end of it because it was such a high profile, very public case of a guy who people, for good reason, knew and claimed he was so evil?
I didn't plan it out. Like I didn't say, I'm going to take this client on and then this is what's going to happen in my career. And, and that might be naivete or stupidity, but it just hit me that this was something important that was being handed to me. And when I say important, I meant that the cause of the death penalty is a very important issue in our society, whether you are for it or against it. And I think that this was my opportunity to stand up against something that I didn't believe in. And when would I ever get this chance to do it again? Even for the horrendous person that Gacy was, I was going to be able to publicly advocate for my position. And I thought that was hugely important and significant. And like you said, I wasn't just advocating for Gacy, I was advocating for all the other people on death row who might have actually good defenses, like actual innocence. Like since, Gacy was executed, we had the 15 years following, we had 12 men walk off of death row with actual innocence, not technicalities. 12 were executed, 12 walked off death row. That's how we're getting it wrong. So even though Gacy didn't have a good defense for actual innocence, other people might have. And so the cause is bigger than the one defendant.
What I find interesting, Karen, is how your name is now linked to John Wayne Gacy's name for the rest of your life, especially since you wrote the book, Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy, which is an amazing book, by the way. What is that like to have that as a part of your brand? John Wayne Gacy is part of your brand. Who would have guessed that, really?
Right. So as with all the 30 years that have gone by since the execution, I have been able to think about that a little bit. And I realized that I'm not the only one. So remember O.J. Simpson? Marcia Clark lost a case that some people think that she should have won. She got $1 million book deal. She got her own show. All the lawyers did well on that. Alan Dershowitz represents horrible people. He loses most of his cases, and he's got a reputation and a spot on CNN. So what I'm saying is that when you represent a high profile, I'm going to say in my case, low profile person, there's something about our society, and I don't know if this is the Kim Kardashian world we live in, that if you're associated with somebody we know, we somehow think more of you. Because you're on television, we think more of you. And that doesn't make any sense. I'm not a better lawyer because of that, but I think it's people's reputation. And I have had clients come to me in the last 30 years and say, I know you represented Gacy. I respect you for being gutsy, and I see how hard you fought for him, and I'm a nice person. I can only imagine how hard you're going to fight for me. So it's been good for my career. And I don't say that Gacy was good for my career. I say that handling the case, and I think doing a good job of doing it with dignity and being prepared, learning what I learned about dealing with the media. I think that helped me move into what I do now, the media analyst that I do and radio shows and all these other things that I do. It's put me in a spotlight in a way that I was prepared for.
And I mean, that's so fascinating, the Kardashian era. And we all know, well, we don't all know, but Robert Kardashian was one of the attorneys for O.J. Simpson on his defense. And his daughter became so famous, let's say, because of a porn video, that was leaked out. And their fame is built on negative things, as well as now she's becoming a lawyer. Like, what the heck is that all about?
I know. Isn't that wild? The whole thing's wild. And even the Bruce Jenner thing is related to the Kardashian, which was related to O.J. Simpson. So if you look at the Venn diagram,
stuff up.
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up.
You can't predict this stuff either. That's for sure.
Wow. It's nuts.
Okay, so as you were talking, one of the things that came to my mind is like, wow, you've been doing this for 30 years. Has burnout hit you with Gacy? Like, how have you avoided that? How have you encountered that at all with being tied to him and just all of the media outlets and all of the stuff that you're doing?
I have accepted that that's going to be my calling card, or as Jules said, my brand. I just accepted that. And I get called upon to, talk at different events and docuseries and docudramas and all this stuff. And I just realized that it's my part in life, that I have this association, but I also use it, as an example of like women's empowerment, like taking on something difficult, being criticized for it, and ending up more resilient and confident. So I use it to talk about the death penalty and why I don't believe in it. I use it, to talk about other things that are important to me. So while, it might sound like a bad thing, it's a calling card, and I'm going to use it to my advantage, even if it is a negative thing.
Yeah.
And why did it take you so long? We just had a question. Why did it take you so long to write about this case?
That's a good question, and I'm glad I did wait. After it happened, I wanted to be away from it. It was so stressful. I needed to get on with my life. I was never going to take a death penalty case again. I gave my all to this. And I also wanted to leave the victims' families alone and leave the case, done. I knew I had a book in me. People ask me all the time these questions, and I know that they're important questions to ask. And it was during COVID, I was on a Peacock series called Devil in Disguise, and some production company came and asked me if I was willing to do a docudrama about my relationship with Gacy. And at that point, I said, not interested in your truth. I'm going to write my truth. And so I sat down and wrote the book during COVID. I wrote really pretty quickly, and it just took a while to get published, and now here I am. So I was kind of pushed into that direction. But now that I look back, I'm glad I did it now, because I can put that in perspective as to how it affected me over the years. If I had done it right away, it wouldn't be the same book.
Did you feel, Karen, like as you were writing the book, and you said you wrote it pretty quickly, do you feel like you were releasing? There was a part of you that was either emotionally releasing anything, or did you feel lighter, or how were you experiencing things emotionally?
It was releasing, and it was, I felt unburdened. Especially, I talk about things like the book is, it's about Gacy. Of course, that's why people will buy it, because people don't know who I am. But it's really about my journey in this whole thing, and how I developed a relationship that was human with someone who did inhumane things. It was about grief. It was about, striving. It was about coming out on the other side. So when I was writing it, it was very cathartic, and I could put in perspective, even though I looked back at that time and it was, I could just feel, everything tighten up inside of me. It allowed me to understand that I wouldn't be who I am as a lawyer or a person had I not had that experience. And so it's made me now look at things that have gone on in my life that have been negative, deaths in my family, or things that go on that have strengthened me. Not that you want that to happen to you, but that you become more resilient. And so it ended up being a happy experience that I was able to kind of go back and think fondly of that time rather than think of it as a bad time.
You definitely like radiate that resilience, right? Like you wouldn't be able to talk about it in the way you do now if you didn't take that time to step away from it, it sounds
Yeah,
like. And
exactly.
especially being so young and so new as a lawyer, like that's gotta be intimidating to even begin to step into that and then to try to figure out how to process it. Were there certain things that helped you get to this resilient point? Were there therapy or anything specific, meditation, stuff like that, that helped you process all that you went through? Because I imagine at the time you're just going through it, right? You're getting it done. You're doing the things you have to, and almost in a way that's not as present. You can't really process it in the moment because it's a lot. It's heavy.
Yeah, it is heavy. You've got Gacy, who's dark and damaged, and then you've got the unpopularity of all of it. You've got victims' families who you're feeling for. You can't be human unless you're feeling for this. And you're putting aside all your other clients. We did this for free, so we probably donated $250,000 to this cause, and you're struggling with that. So yes, I should have had a therapist. I probably should have. I did not. But, I'm just a resilient person to begin with. This made me more so. And I think that, I haven't gone through things that most, not the worst things in the world. I had 3 square meals a day and 2 parents and a decent home life. But I did have some things that I had to go through myself. And I think that those things helped me with Gacy. And then Gacy turned around and helped me with the rest of the things that went on in my life that were adverse.
Wow, Karen. I know that Tia and Jules, they're big fans of like true crimes and things like that. And so I'm the complete opposite. I'm the meditator, kumbaya like vibe. But I did learn so much while researching this and researching into your life. And John Wayne Gacy just, one person says, so strong, this woman. And they actually echoed my point. Like, you're resilient and you're tough. And how did you become this way during that time or before that time? Like, how were you shaped and molded in this way to be able to carry that load? Before we wrap it up, I just want to say, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Mika. I look back and I talk about this in my book. My mother was a difficult person. She was good for me in a lot of ways, pushed me relentlessly to succeed. And, but as a result, I kind of had to be my own counsel and had to kind of self-love, in my household. And so I learned to cope. But, my dad was a stand-up comic and he was away a lot, but he was very funny. So I think humor was a big thing that got me through some of these things. I put myself through law school and college, working jobs, multiple jobs to do it. I just think that I have lived a life that hasn't been super easy. I've never had a safety net. And while I look back sometimes and say, woe is me, all my friends were tooling around in cars where they were in college and I was walking because I couldn't afford a car. I'm glad I didn't have a safety net because I will never need a safety net.
I love that.
That's so fascinating to me. And the fact that you are where you are, you took a professional risk that probably, or it has affected you in so many different ways, personally, professionally, your mental health, physical health. I'm not saying, like, Karen Conti obviously is awesome. We know this. And she's strong. She is strong and resilient. What is one thing we need to know about you? What is one thing we need to know about you before everybody here goes out and buys Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy? What is the one thing we need to know about you as we wrap it up?
I think that you need to know that I'm very empathetic and very curious. Those are probably 2 of my strongest traits, and they can get you into trouble, like curiosity kills cats. But I never would have done any of this had I not just wanted to experience seeing John Gacy in person. Wow. And so, and then I also think that being empathetic and putting yourself in someone else's shoes and not judging people because they're not what you are, or that if someone's evil every minute of the day. Gacy wasn't evil every minute of the day, and I showed him empathy. I showed him empathy that he didn't show for any of his victims. And so I learned about that, and I learned that that's the right way to be. And that you don't stoop to the level of some of the people who might be around you in this world, because there's a lot of people who I don't want to be like.
Wow. You guys, go check out Karen's book, Killing Time with John Wayne Gacy. It's amazing. It's powerful. And I also want to congratulate my two co-hosts. We are ranking really high in Apple Podcasts. So make sure you subscribe to this podcast, the show, follow us on YouTube. Subscribe, share on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this, because we want to change the world like Karen Conti has. It's about understanding different opinions, where people come from, and doing it together. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Karen. Love you.
Love you too, Julie.
Thank you, Karen.
Welcome to Obsessed, where Mika, Tia, and I challenge the thoughts that limit you, where we provide the tools for transformation. Be prepared to be swept away into the raw power of obsession, unlocking secrets and stories behind the insatiable hunger for growth and change. This is more than just a podcast. This is your story. It is a manifesto for those who refuse to settle, who dare to dream, and who are relentless in the pursuit of living a great life. Get obsessed with your life.